Hey, good morning from Kansas City. Welcome to a new season for the Chiefs and for SportsBeat Live. We're talking about the Chiefs with the folks at the Star who know them best. Who's here today? Herbie Teope in the house. So Sam McDowell, Vahe Gregorian, and Sam Mellinger. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning, Blair.
Good to see you guys. Good to see you. Hey, listen, they'd love to hear from you. So would I. Please send us your questions and comments, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can. So here we go. The 2021 season starts Sunday at Arrowhead Stadium against Cleveland Browns. It's season number 62 for the Kansas City Chiefs and number 59 here in Kansas City. Expectations running a little hot here in town, and they should. Vegas over-under has the Chiefs at 12.5 victories this season, and they're favored in 16 of 17 games, and the others are pick 'em. I know this because I read Sam McDowell's story on this topic. Sam, that seems a little optimistic for the Chiefs. Favored in 16 of 17 games?
Yeah, but a lot of the lines are closer than they were last year. It's something else I noted in that story, but they were favored by double digits in every home game last year until they rested the starters in week 17. They're not favored by double digits, but one home game. So much tougher schedule, but I guess if you're picking them game by game, it's hard to pick against this team right now.
What's the pick 'em game?
Baltimore, week 2.
And what's the line for Sunday's game?
6. The Chiefs are favored by 6. Some still have it at 6.5, but it's moved down, and some to 6 right now.
Okay. As we often do, let's get started with an injury report, and that'll, I think, lead us into some conversation here. So, Herbie, what did Andy Reid say about injured Chiefs yesterday?
Well, he's not necessarily injured, but Tyrann Mathieu remains on the reserve COVID-19 list a week after testing positive. Reid says his tests are, quote, getting better, end quote. And as we all know, in accordance with the NFL protocol, you have to pass the COVID test, 2 consecutive tests within a span of 24 hours. And a week later, and he still hasn't passed and is not off the COVID list. I'm starting to raise my eyebrows here. But I did ask Reid, if he does clear the protocol, is he the kind of player that can practice or play without practice? And Reid said yes. He mentioned that he probably could. Outside of Tyrann Mathieu, Austin Blythe did not practice yesterday. We know that because he had sports hernia surgery at the end of August. Frank Clark, limited with a hamstring injury, much to Sam McDowell's chagrin. And then we got wide receiver Mecole Hardman, who was also limited with an oblique injury. And then Derek Nottie, who's been in and out of practice throughout training camp. He's still dealing with that hip injury. Good news for the Chiefs. Running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire with the ankle injury put in a full practice, along with Laurent Duvernay-Tardif with the hand injury. He put in a full practice, so he'll be available in the backup role. Mike Remmers and Trey Smith also put in a full practice. Remmers dealing with a knee injury. Smith dealing with a shoulder injury.
Anyone want to take a stab at what getting better testing means, or whatever Andy Reid phrased that? The testing's improved for Tyrann Mathieu.
Well, the only possibility actually is that you do have to test negative on back-to-back days within a 24-hour period. So I actually wondered if he did mean that maybe he's passed that first one. Of course, we don't know that for sure, but I just think that's a possibility for the reason he phrased it that way.
And I'm just glad he didn't say anything about day-to-day. As long as he keeps away from that and doesn't say literally, I think it's promising. It was vague, obviously, but it does seem like he was trying to make some point about some element of progress, right? So I take it that we're one away. And
isn't he scheduled to speak to the media today, Herbie? Tyrann Mathieu?
No, I think it's Chris Jones, yeah.
Oh, okay.
When they gave us a list, they didn't mention Tyrann Mathieu. We'll see. The Chiefs will get that to us.
Yeah, but there will be another injury update later, probably in a couple of hours. Hey, listen, if if he can't go on Sunday, that is a major blow. This is for obvious reasons, but he had a huge game against the Browns in the playoffs last year. Had the interception, had 2 or 3 tackles for loss. He was a major player in the victory over the Browns. What would the Chiefs be missing if Tyrann Mathieu? How would the Chiefs line up at that position if Tyrann Mathieu can't go?
Probably Juan Thornhill and Daniel Sorensen. Those are your 2 likely options there because as of right now, they're only carrying 4 safeties on the active 53-player roster with Mathieu, Sorensen, Thornhill, and Armani Watts. So, yeah, if you're missing Mathieu for this game, that's a huge hole on the back end of coverage.
Okay, and you also mentioned Frank Clark, the mystery man of the Chiefs. We have not heard from Frank Clark throughout training camp, or we haven't heard from him since the end of last season. I suspect I can't remember the last time he spoke to the media. I guess it was during OTAs, maybe.
OTAs. Yep.
Okay, and that was before any revelation about the legal trouble that he got into in California. What about options there if Frank Clark can't go? And we did not see him in preseason games, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I think that the Chiefs should be covered on the defensive end position because Mike Dana has really emerged, and he's been throughout training camp when Clark first hurt that hamstring. It was Dana who was lining up on the right defensive end spot in Frank Clark's place, and then you have some depth there. You've got Joshua Kando, you've got Alex Okafor, so I think that they should be they'll be able to be covered there.
One player you didn't mention, and because his injury was announced earlier, and so he's not on the current list, is Willie Gay Jr. And that's such a tough break for him. Guy who couldn't play in the postseason last year, who all of us have written about in some form about how much progress he made and what kind of in his 1 preseason game he played well, and now he's not going to have him for at least the Chiefs aren't going to have him for 3 weeks. So there's some little bit of mystery about how the Chiefs are going to fill that position. Is it, Ben Neiman looks like he's going to start. Nick Bolton is certainly the fan favorite. What happens at the Willie Gay position?
I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if they do roll out Anthony Hitchens, Ben Neiman, and Nick Bolton in that spot. Andy Reid, he's been asked numerous times during this week, how is Nick Bolton progressing? And he's highly complimentary. And on Monday, he said, hey, he's worthy of taking more reps. And, he's not going to come out and announce who's starting, but it just would not surprise me one bit if it is Nick Bolton, because who else are you going to trust there? Dorian O'Daniel, a guy that the Chiefs have used mostly at special teams. And so I think it has to be Nick Bolton.
Okay, hey, Paul Eccles asks, what's the Chiefs' schedule difficulty rank this year? It seems like it's stacked to be tough. They're playing a first-place schedule, right? I mean, that's and they have for the last, however many years they've won was it 5 years in a row they've won the AFC West? They always get a first-place schedule. But, yeah, Browns, Ravens, Bills, it happens to be the year they play the NFC North, right? So that may be the toughest division in football. With the Ravens, Steelers, Browns, and again the first place schedule. What is it? Do we think going into the season, Sam, that it's a tougher schedule than previous years?
No, it's actually, I think it's out of the top 10 this year. Part of that is because the 3 teams in the division have to play the Chiefs twice, so all 3 of those schedules are, even though they're not playing first place schedule. I think the Raiders have the toughest schedule in the NFL this year. I think the Steelers are up there, but I think the Chiefs are actually like in that 10 to 15 range this year.
Okay,
I think they get the NFC East, right? So the NFC East has got to be the weakest division in football.
It could I think their out of division games are really difficult, but I think I think the Chargers could be good, but you get 4 games against the Broncos and Raiders, that's gonna pull it down a little bit, but it's still, I'm excited. I mean, especially early, getting the Browns, was it Browns, Chargers, or Browns, Ravens, Chargers, Bills, they're all within the first, 4, 5, 6 weeks. I think it's going to be fun. We're going to know a lot. it's not going to take a long time to figure out where this team is.
And in the 17th game, the crossover game this year, they get the Green Bay Packers. So it's not like they got a rummy there. I mean, the Packers are coming to Arrowhead, and so there's that. All right, so a lot of the off-season storylines that ever since the Super Bowl loss to the Bucs, what the Chiefs did to improve. They're going to have 6 new starters on offense on Sunday, 5 of them at one position group, and Vahe, that's pretty significant to have an entirely new starting offensive line, and all eyes are on Orlando Brown and Joe Thuney and the 3 rookies on the right side and at center. So what do we expect from a brand new offensive line?
Well, I think you look at each piece and everybody feels pretty okay about each piece, but I think it's about the collective. And there's some expression I heard once: the first pancake always has lumps. So I think it might be we'll see some lumps here in the early going, just because at least last I remember there was going to be 3 rookies in there, and no matter how good they are, no matter how natural they are, they're going to see stuff they haven't seen before. And promising start, nice foundation, but what that will look like in these first few weeks, I think the Chiefs even understand that there's going to be some moments where it doesn't gel completely, and they've got a formidable task across the line. And it is kind of interesting. I mean, it's a side point, but the Browns have everybody back on their offensive line. So it's just a little study in contrast there.
The first pancake always has lumps. I like that.
I want to point out, though, on that doesn't happen at IHOP. I'm just pointing that out.
We have a pancake expert on the panel here.
Let me toss in one other thing real quick, which is it we'll probably get into these numbers more later, but the Browns have had a lot of lumps in their pancakes on these openers for going back to 2005 since they've won an opener, which is really unbelievable. And meanwhile, the Chiefs in the Mahomes era are 10-0 this month, right? And Andy's never lost to the Browns. So there's a lot of things like that. But I think the number we'll be thinking about probably is the 22-17 from the playoffs last year and how close that was. And I think that's going to say more about what might be involved in this game than all that past stuff.
Here's what Patrick Mahomes had to say about the Chiefs' fast starts in September as a starting quarterback.
You guys have started off, I think, 4-0, 5-0, something like that, including your rookie year. Something you can put your finger on as to why you guys have been able to start all of these seasons so quickly?
Yeah, I think we just stress the importance on starting the season fast. We have a very tough training camp, as everyone knows, where we really compete and go at it every single day at practice, and I think that prepares us to be ready to go from day one. And so I think just stressing the importance. We've kind of came out in my time at least with a lot of really good football teams up early in the season, and we know that if you lose a game in September, it could cost you at the end of the season as far as seedings if you're trying to get in the playoffs. And so we just stress the importance, knowing that we're playing a lot of really good football teams at the beginning of the year.
And what's his touchdown to interception ratio in September? Anybody know that? I think it's 32-0. That makes for a decent passer rating, I understand. I don't know that for sure, but my guess is that would be a good passer rating. And
really good in the openers too, Blair. 10 touchdowns, no interceptions in the openers. He's had at least 123 rating in all 3 openers. So really good at the start of seasons. Really good at the end of seasons too.
Yeah, not too bad at the end of seasons with the team in the Super Bowl the last two years. So Paul reminds us the IHOP pancakes were made 8 hours previous, so that's why there were no lumps in those.
Yes.
I think he's correct. Hey, while we're running some tape, I wanted to hear from Andy Reid as well, and this is Andy Reid on just the close nature of games. Sam McDowell, we talked about the what the Chiefs over under is, and they're what they're favored by double digits. at home last year, and they didn't cover in a lot of those games. Here's what Andy Reid had to say about the Chiefs in close games. I think they were 8-0 in games decided by 6 points or less last year.
Yeah, you guys won a lot of close games last year. When you look back at that, I mean, obviously you won 14 games. Was there something at the start of games maybe that put an emphasis to try and get out of this situation?
Yeah, so we went through a little phase there where we didn't start fast, and but kind of picked it up as we went. And I tell you that, I mean, it's a crazy stat, but the number of games in this league that are determined by 7 points or less is ridiculous. I mean, it's there's so much parity. So I analyze those things and look at them, but to get better. But you prepare, obviously with all the situational football that you prepare for, in case you're in that mode, just by the analytics of it. It's ridiculous.
I think Andy Reid analyzes a lot of things. I don't think I've ever heard him say specifically what he analyzes. I thought that was kind of interesting for Andy. And of course, when you have a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, you're going to have more success than not in those close games. So,
Well, Blair, just a quick point on that, because I asked that question for a specific reason to Andy Reid yesterday. I mean, there certainly is a lot of parity in the NFL, but the Chiefs are one of the best teams, and therefore these games shouldn't be as close. A lot of those games we're talking about, I mean, I mentioned earlier that they were favored by double digits in a lot of those games where they're fighting off for the end. I looked up last year in the first quarter that they're 13th in the league last year in first quarter points at 5.4. 2 years ago, Mahomes' first year, they averaged 9 points a game in the first quarter. So there's been a dip in their production in the first quarter, and that's the reason they find themselves in so many close games late last year. So Mahomes talked to us about, Blair, you, Herbie, and me, he talked to us about the fact that there's a major emphasis on trying to get off to better starts this year. Just a topic I'm writing about later this week.
yeah, I just remember a couple of games, after they pounded the Jets at home, it just seemed like every home game after that, the Panthers, the Falcons, all those games were closer than you would have expected them to be. And, they didn't have problems scoring against the Panthers. They did against the Falcons. I don't know. Whatever that means. I mean, it's the Chiefs finished 14-2. They set a franchise record for victories last year. They got the W. So, however they get it. Hey, Brian, go ahead, Sam.
Just real quick is I draw a direct line in what Sam's talking, what you guys are talking about there. I draw directly connect that to this 20-0 stuff that Mahomes is talking about. I think that he looks at that season like, yeah, we were winning the games, but not sort of hyper focused on each practice, each game, each quarter, each snap. And I think that's why he's saying this, is to get back to that, because I think they had more of that in 2019. I think last year it was more like, well, let's just, we can beat these guys, whatever. Let's just get through the game and we'll get into the playoffs and then kind of turn it on. I think that 20-0 is his way of saying, no, like let's present our best selves for the playoffs. And the way to do that is win each day.
Absolutely agree.
He's mentioned that more than once in the preseason, hasn't he? And usually in reference to being asked about the 20-0 comment he made in Lake Tahoe. So Brian LeBurge asks, what do we think we'll see much of the 4 tight end set, or will they dress only 3 tight ends on Sunday? That's an interesting question. And Herbie, we have a name for the 4 tight end set, don't we?
T-Rex, baby, 14 personnel. I think when you think about that package, it's certainly intriguing, but I don't think they're going to have 4 tight ends active every single week. It's going to depend on the opponent, what the opponent's defense, their tendencies, et cetera, because, the Chiefs like to exploit those kinds of things. So I would be very surprised if you have 4 tight ends active every single week. It'll depend on the opponent.
Okay. Hey, and Jack Weaver. Hey, good morning, Jack. What do we think about the matchup between new offensive line and their defensive line? I think that goes back to something we were talking about earlier. All eyes are going to be on the Chiefs' offensive line, and they're going to get tested in this game like they were not tested in the preseason. What is it, Sam, about McDowell, about the Browns' defensive line that could give the Chiefs trouble?
Well, I mean, they're really good, right? I mean, Myles Garrett is as good as anybody on the edge. They added Jadeveon Clowney, and they were already a good unit last year. So I think, I think Sam might have written something about as well, but it's the most interesting matchup within the matchup to me because all eyes are on this new Chiefs offensive line, and what better way to figure out exactly how much they've improved it than facing this front four.
Here's the interesting thing to me on this one. The Chiefs spent a lot of time upgrading their offensive line. The Browns did the opposite and spent a lot of their capital during the offseason bolstering their defense. You mentioned Jadeveon Clowney. They also added Tack McKinley and so many other players, Malik Jackson, Anthony Walker. So, they made a conscious effort to bolster that defense, whereas the Chiefs did their offense. So that's going to be a fascinating matchup heading into this game.
I think the other things the Browns did is they got two free agents from the Rams secondary, Johnson and Tony Hill, who in the Rams secondary, the Rams had the NFL's top pass defense last year, and you're right, the Browns I think improved. I think they're an improved team from the 11-5 from last season, and it's the Chiefs are favored for a reason, but boy, the talk that I hear from Cleveland media, just reading Cleveland stuff, is this this is a pretty important game for them, but more important than a typical opener. And I think we're going to see a pretty competitive game on Sunday. So let's just talk about the season in general. Over/unders 12.5. If the Chiefs are going to go back to a third straight Super Bowl, let's call it a fourth straight AFC Championship game, a third straight Super Bowl, what has to go right for this team? What maybe do we need to see from this Chiefs team that we didn't see in their weakest moments a year ago that will convince us that this is another Super Bowl bound team? Vahe, what do you think?
Well, one of the things, Blair, this is a little different than the way you're phrasing the question, but it's what I think about. I think they're going to have to sustain some early blows that maybe we haven't seen them sustain in the Mahomes era. I think we might see their first loss in September since Patrick's been the starter. I don't know if it'll be this week or at Baltimore, but I hold out that possibility just because of the X factor of the line. But I think the important thing is going to be that over the first 5, 6, 8 weeks that line comes together more and more. And I think what will matter is their momentum going into the playoffs. I still think they'll be around that 12-win spot, but I just think we might see some early panic with possibly their first loss in September in a few years. So they just need to literally keep getting better the whole way. I just don't think they're going to be the finished product. It reminds me a little bit of when they blew up the defense a couple of years ago and had to get that together over the first couple months of the season to be the unit that would help them win the Super Bowl.
It's interesting to me that with this iteration of the Chiefs, there's been 2 times that they've kind of had a huge major change and sort of, back channel casual conversations, put out the message that, look, this is going to work. We believe in this. It's going to make a big difference, but there's going to be some ugly moments early. And the one is the defense, like Vahe just mentioned. And they were dead right on that. There were some ugly moments. And then it took until, it was that Mexico City game in November, shortly before Thanksgiving, if I remember right. And then the other one was the quarterback when they got a new quarterback in 2018, and that one did not take any time at all. They both worked, but that was So I'm just curious, which version we might get, assuming that it ends up working, because in the preseason at least, I don't know how they could have been better. It's just preseason. I get that. Other teams like, what was it? The Cardinals weren't playing any of their guys, or 49ers, I'm sorry. But still couldn't have worked out better, but it is just the preseason. It's just like really interesting to watch how those guys communicate and all that.
It is really funny, Sam. You mentioned that about Mahomes, and I've kind of forgotten that. Like, oh, it's going to take him a few weeks. It's don't expect anything too soon out of him. And that was just absolutely blown up the first week.
He was 10 touchdowns, no interceptions in the first 2 games, if I remember right.
He was. Remember, he slung that touchdown pass to Tyreek Hill against the Chargers in the soccer stadium for his first touchdown pass, and then he goes to Pittsburgh the next week, and I think he throws touchdown passes on the first 3 possessions of the game in Pittsburgh. It was quite amazing, actually. Tyler Hoffman asks, will Chris Jones play more defensive end or defensive tackle this season? Sam McDowell, what do you think?
He's going to play more defensive end. I mean, they're going to rotate him at both positions. But right now, their bigger need is for him to be a really good edge rusher. They've got more depth at defensive tackle with the addition of Jaron Reed. I think Turk Wharton is a really good edge rusher. Derek Nottie is a good run stopper. Colin Saunders has had a good training camp. So I just think that they're set at defensive tackle in a way that they aren't at defensive end. And he's going to play there more based on need than that's where they think his best attributes are, because he obviously has had a ton of success rushing the passer from the interior, which is always the risk. I mean, that's always the question that you've got to ask yourself. What am I losing by moving him out? And that's why I point to the depth that they have there to fill in the gaps at defensive tackle that I just don't think they have at defensive end if he can't play out there.
Right. Peter Alden asked, which running back do you anticipate seeing or having seen in goal line packages? What do you think, Herbie? Who's among Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Darrell Williams, or Jerick McKinnon? Who might we see in goal line situations?
If the Chiefs are committed to running the football, and when you look at this offensive line compared to previous seasons, to me, it projects as a Mauler-type offensive line. You got Trey Smith, who's very physical, Creed Humphrey, who's very physical, Joe Tooney, who's very physical. To me, that sets up Darrell Williams in the goal line packages. Now, if they're passing, then obviously it's either CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or Jerick McKinnon. But if they're going to run the ball when they're close, I think it's Darrell Williams.
Kudos to the fan for being such a good fantasy manager that he's checking in on our SportsBeat Live just to check out who's getting the goal line carries, though.
The vulture.
I'll tell you what, when I do radio spots, that's all people want to know is who the Chiefs goal line running back is going to be, who the Chiefs number 2 wide receiver is going to be. They don't care about the team's potential success. It's what numbers. And speaking of the number 2 wide receiver, also quite an off-season topic. What do we think about the production after Kelce and Tyreek Hill? Where does it go? Do we think it's going to be one player step up and own that wide receiver 2 spot, or will it be a collection of talent there? What do you think, Herbie?
I think it's going to be a collection. Okay, here's the deal. And I know a lot of people love to talk about the number 2 wide receiver, but when I look at this Chiefs offense, when you take away, when you include Kelce and you include Tyreek Hill, where else is the ball going to go where you're going to get those elite 1,000-yard receivers? It's a rare thing for NFL teams to have 3 1,000-yard receivers. So I think it'll be a collection of stuff. Don't forget, before Sammy Watkins joined this offense in 2018, he was a 1,000-yard wide receiver. So I don't think his production going down. When you think of the pecking order, it doesn't surprise. Now, a good year for number 2 wide receiver in Reed's offense will probably be anywhere between 750 to 900 yards, and I think that can be considered a success. But you do want to see Mecole Hardman take another step. 2 straight years, 500 yards receiving. I don't think that's what they drafted him for. He needs to take the next step. But I wouldn't get too caught up on who's the number 2 and what kind of numbers he's going to get, because you can't expect gaudy production in this offense.
I just keep saying this, and I'm going to keep saying it, but their number 2 receiver is either Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce. Like that's the deal. We're talking about the number 3 receiver. I just want that to be a thing.
It's true. I agree with that. But if we're looking at who's going to be third in receptions for the Chiefs this year, I believe that was Demarcus Robinson. It ended up being Demarcus Robinson. I say it's going to be Byron Pringle, but we'll see about that.
Pringle, that's interesting.
Yep. Ken Lobaugh asked, "Are we underplaying the significance of the 5 new starters?" I don't know. I think Vahe hit the nail on the head when he said, "Look, it's just going to take a little while." That's the position that I think Chiefs fans are going to pay closest attention to on Sunday. The 5 new starters, especially the rookies, and we'll see what Myles Garrett does, the havoc he can create for the Browns on Sunday. Hey, I wanted to give each of you one prop bet and tell me what you think about it, and we'll start to wind it down. So, let's see. How about Sam Mellinger? I will start with you. Over under sacks for Chris Jones this year is 9.5. Over under for Chris Jones sacks.
Is that right?
According to one prop bet that I saw, yep.
I might actually open an account and bet on the over. That seems like it seems like if you're going under, you're betting on him getting hurt. It's going to be hard for me to imagine him playing 17 games. And look, maybe they rest the starters, right? And it's only 16 or whatever. But no, I'd feel very confident in taking the over on that.
Okay. All right. Vahe, over under passing yards for Patrick Mahomes, 49.68.5. Keep in mind, the 0.5 could swing it. 49.68.5.
I'm glad you threw in the 0.5, but I think I was going to go under anyway. If this team is what we think it might and could and should be, I think that's going to naturally mean a little more emphasis on the run, and it just seems to me that it'll be under that.
That's an outrageous number, by the way. Like that's I get that we have the extra game, but almost 5,000 yards is just that's the baseline now.
Well, that is funny. Now that you say that, I'm like not even blinking an eye. Like that's where it's set. I mean, it is pretty preposterous.
I mean, there's only been 11 seasons, right, of a 5,000-yard passer in NFL history. So, okay, Herbie, how about the over-under touchdown passes for Patrick Mahomes? 38.5.
The 0.5 is going to do it for me. I'm going to take the over. How can you not? I mean, the man is capable of putting up 50 touchdowns, and I think I tend to agree with Vahe. They might try to run a little bit more, but ultimately, this is Patrick Mahomes' team, and we all know Andy Reid loves to pass. So I'll take the over.
Okay. All right. And for Sam McDowell, the over-under on Chiefs victories this year is 12.5.
I think as long as the quarterback's healthy, they're going to win at least 14. I mean, they went 14-1 with Mahomes last year, and they have an extra game this year. And I realize the schedule's a bit more difficult, but I'd have a hard time seeing this team only go 12-5 as long as the quarterback's healthy.
Okay. Paul Chamberlain weighs in. 4 times I'm typing a question, and you guys answer it in mid-typing. That's how good these guys are right here. That's how good this panel is. These guys, we all have to get to a Chiefs practice. So injury updates are on the way, along with other information about the Chiefs. We'll hear from the coordinators today. And as Herbie said earlier, Chris Jones also talking to the media. Just a couple of announcements. We'll come to you again after Chiefs games this season. We're looking at Thursday mornings at 9:30, the time we started today for our regular weekly Chiefs chat. You all have been great with your questions and comments. You make the show go. We really appreciate that. And I'm looking into the future here a little bit, and I see our Sunday football section is been printed. And please, what's the headline for it? Eyes on a reprisal. Please pick up a Sunday edition of the Kansas City Star to get one of those football sections. There are Gregorian and Mellinger columns, many stories by Herbie Teope and Sam McDowell. Pete Gradhoff has contributed. I think I might have one in there as well. It's great stuff, and we enjoy doing it. And one other sort of public service announcement, starting Monday, the morning sports edition is going to bring subscribers a ramped up and amped up daily sports report. We're talking 30 to 40 pages of locally and nationally meaningful content each day, packed full of the stuff you told us you wanted. So more Chiefs, more Royals, more sporting, more KU, Mizzou, K-State, KCNWSL, more of everything. So be on the lookout for that on Monday. All right, for Sam, Herbie, Sam, Vahe, and our producer, Beth Welsh, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all you all for your participation, and we'll talk to you after Sunday's game against the Cleveland Browns.